I was burning alive when he finally saw me. Really saw me. Alpha Garrett, who'd ordered my execution, stood frozen as the flames licked my skin, his silver eyes wide with a horror that transcended cruelty. Because there, glowing beneath the fire that should have consumed me, was the mark he'd spent 2 centuries searching for. The sacred Luna symbol blazing across my collarbone like a brand from the moon goddess herself. His command had been absolute: burn the traitor. But the flames had betrayed him instead, revealing the one truth that would shatter everything he believed about power, about destiny, about me. My name is Alara, and this is the story of how I died to become who I was always meant to be. The chains were iron, blessed with wolfsbane oil that seared my wrists with every breath. They'd stripped me of everything: my dignity, my rank, my name, and left me with nothing but the thin linen shift that would serve as kindling for my execution. The pyre stood in the center of the sacred grounds, a monument to my alleged betrayal, built from ancient oak that had witnessed 300 years of pack justice. I'd stopped crying 2 days ago. There's only so much grief a body can hold before it starts to crystallize into something harder. Something that looks like acceptance but feels like rage frozen in time. My name is Alara. It means bright as the moon in the old Greek tongue. And for 23 years, I'd been nothing special. Not the fastest wolf, not the strongest fighter, not blessed with prophetic dreams or healing gifts. Just ordinary. The daughter of the Silver Ridge Pack's record keeper, destined to inherit a library of bloodlines and territorial treaties, destined for a quiet life of service, until I'd been accused of the one crime no wolf could survive: betraying the Alpha's trust. The crowd gathered as the sun dipped below the mountains, painting the sky the color of old blood. I recognized every face. Marcus, who'd taught me to track rabbits when I was 7. Lydia, whose daughter I'd tutored in pack history. James, the warrior who'd once told me I had kind eyes. Now they looked at me like I was already ash, already gone, already erased from pack memory. But it was him I couldn't stop watching. Alpha Garrett stood on the raised platform reserved for pack judgment, his tall frame radiating the kind of authority that made grown wolves bow their heads without thinking. At 237 years old, he was ancient by our standards, though he appeared no older than 35. His hair was the color of winter storms, that strange silver gray that spoke of power and time, and his eyes were the pale silver of a full moon reflecting off snow. He was beautiful the way a blade is beautiful: cold, perfect, dangerous. He was also the wolf who'd ordered my death. Bring her forward, his voice carried across the grounds. And even now, even facing my execution, my wolf stirred at the sound of it. That was the cruelest joke of all, that some traitorous part of me still responded to him like he was something holy. 2 guards gripped my arms and dragged me toward the pyre. My bare feet scraped against the stone, leaving traces of blood that would be washed away by morning. Everything about me would be washed away by morning. That was the point of burning, to leave nothing behind: no body to mourn, no bones to bury, just smoke in the memory of smoke. They chained me to the central post, wrapping the binding so tight I could barely breathe. The wood beneath my feet was soaked in accelerant. They weren't taking chances. This fire would burn hot and fast. Garrett descended from the platform, each step measured and deliberate. He moved like violence in slow motion, and the crowd parted for him the way the sea must have parted for ancient prophets. When he reached the pyre's edge, he stopped, his silver eyes fixing on mine with an intensity that made my wolf whimper. "Ilara," he said, using my full name like a condemnation, "you stand accused of conspiring with the Bloodfang Pack to reveal our territorial weaknesses. You stand accused of passing classified pack records to our enemies. You stand accused of betraying the trust placed in you as the record keeper's heir." My throat was dry as ancient paper. I didn't. "You were seen," his voice could have cut glass, "at the border meeting with Bloodfang scouts. 3 different wolves witnessed your treachery. I was gathering herbs." The words ripped from my chest. Desperate, true, useless. "The moonflower only grows in the border zone. I needed it for—" "Enough!" The word fell like an executioner's blade. "You were given every opportunity to confess, to name your co-conspirators, to beg for mercy. You chose silence. Because there was nothing to confess, because I wasn't guilty. Because I'd realized 2 days ago that Garrett had already decided my fate, and nothing I said would change his mind. I'd realized something else too. In those 2 days of darkness and chains, I'd realized that Garrett wanted me guilty. That some part of him needed to believe I'd betrayed him because the alternative, that he'd condemned an innocent wolf, was unacceptable to an alpha who prided himself on perfect judgment. I have nothing to confess, I said quietly, because I did nothing wrong. Something flickered in his eyes. For just a moment, I saw doubt, saw the question forming, saw him begin to wonder. But then it was gone, shuttered behind the iron control of an alpha who'd ruled for 2 centuries, who'd survived challenges, wars, plagues, and political upheavals by never showing weakness, never admitting error. Then you die with your lies, he said, and turned away. Elder Hammond stepped forward with a ceremonial torch, blessed by the pack priestess and dipped in sacred oils. He was ancient, over 300 years old, and his hands shook as he held the fire. I'd always liked Hammond. He'd let me read the forbidden histories, the ones about the Luna-marked wolves who were supposed to bring balance to the pack world. Now he couldn't meet my eyes. By the authority of the Alpha and the laws of the Silver Ridge Pack, Hammond's voice wavered, I commit this traitor to the purifying flames. May the moon goddess judge her soul. He lowered the torch to the pyre's base. The fire caught instantly, racing around the circle of wood with hungry enthusiasm. The heat hit me first, then the smoke. I closed my eyes and pictured the forest I'd run through as a child, the cool streams, the silent snow. I would not scream. I would not give them that. The flames reached my feet, and the pain was immediate, enormous, consuming. But something strange happened. Instead of charring my skin, the fire seemed to flow over me like water. It hurt. Gods, it hurt. But it wasn't destroying me. It was illuminating something. I looked down. Through the curtain of fire, I saw my collarbone glowing with an internal light, forming a pattern I'd never seen before. A crescent moon blazing golden against my skin. The crowd saw it too. A collective gasp rippled through them. Hammond dropped the torch, his ancient face slack with shock. And Garrett stood at the edge of the flames, his silver eyes wide, the composed mask of alpha authority shattered by pure, unfiltered astonishment. Stop! His roar cut through the crackle of flames. Douse the fire, now! Warriors rushed forward with water, with dirt, with blankets to smother the flames. The fire died quickly, leaving me standing unburned in the center of the charred wood. The pain faded, but the mark on my collarbone continued to glow, pulsing with a light that seemed tethered to the moon above. The crowd stared in shocked silence. Some fell to their knees, others backed away, making signs of warding. Garrett approached slowly, as if I might vanish if he moved too quickly. His expression was unreadable, a complex mixture of disbelief, wonder, and something that looked almost like fear. He stopped just inches from me, close enough that I could see the flecks of darker gray in his silver irises. The Luna mark, he whispered. After all this time. He reached out, his fingers hovering just above the glowing crescent on my collarbone. He didn't touch me, but I felt the heat of his hand, felt something in the mark respond to his proximity, pulsing brighter. Release her, he commanded, his voice rough. Now. The guards rushed to obey, fumbling with the chains. When the wolfsbane-coated iron fell away from my wrists, I nearly collapsed. 237 years of alpha power radiated from Garrett, flooding the clearing, making lesser wolves cringe and bare their throats in submission. But he wasn't looking at them. He was looking at me. Bring her to the healing chambers, he ordered, not taking his eyes from mine, and summon Thalia. As the guards helped me from the pyre, I noticed Victor for the first time. Garrett's oldest friend and advisor stood at the edge of the crowd, his face a mask of carefully controlled neutrality. But his eyes followed me with a calculation that sent a chill down my spine despite the lingering heat of the flames. The healing chambers were deep in the heart of the Silver Ridge territory, carved into the mountain itself. Cool stone walls radiated an ancient power, symbols of protection and healing etched into every surface. They laid me on a bed of soft furs, and a young wolf brought water and clean cloths. No one spoke to me. They moved with the cautious reverence of people in the presence of something they don't understand and aren't sure they want to. Time blurred. My body felt strange, both weightless and impossibly heavy. The mark on my collarbone had stopped glowing so brightly, but it remained visible, a silvery crescent that seemed to shift slightly when I wasn't looking directly at it. I must have drifted to sleep, because when I opened my eyes again, an old woman was sitting beside my bed. Thalia, the pack's eldest healer and keeper of the old ways. Her face was a map of wrinkles, but her eyes were sharp as hawk talons, missing nothing. Well, she said, her voice cracking like autumn leaves, you've caused quite the commotion, little recorder. I tried to sit up, but my body protested. What's happening to me? She smiled, revealing teeth still strong despite her age. What's happening is that you're becoming. The question is, becoming what? Footsteps echoed from the stone corridor before I could ask what she meant. Alpha Garrett entered, followed by Hammond and, curiously, Victor. Garrett had changed from his ceremonial clothes into something simpler, dark pants and a gray shirt that made his eyes seem even more silver in the low light. He'd always had that quality, the ability to dominate a room simply by existing in it. Leave us, he told the others. Victor hesitated. Are you certain that's— Leave us, Garrett repeated, not raising his voice but infusing it with alpha command. Victor's jaw tightened, but he bowed and departed with Hammond, leaving only Thalia, who raised an eyebrow at Garrett as if daring him to try ordering her around. Garrett ignored the challenge. How is she? Unburned, Thalia replied dryly, which is remarkable considering. The mark? Authentic. I've checked the ancient texts. It matches the descriptions perfectly. Talia's gnarled fingers brushed against my collarbone, just above the crescent. The Luna mark appears only in times of great need, when balance must be restored. It's impossible, Garrett muttered, pacing the length of the small chamber. There hasn't been a Luna-marked wolf in over 500 years. Thalia cackled. Apparently, the moon goddess disagrees with your assessment of impossibility. Garrett stopped pacing and looked at me. Really looked at me. Perhaps for the first time. Not as the record-keeper's daughter. Not as the accused traitor, but as something new. Something unexpected. Something potentially valuable. Do you understand what this means? He asked me. I wet my lips, which still tasted of smoke. No. It means I nearly executed the one wolf who could save us all. His voice was flat, but I sensed the turmoil beneath. An alpha admitting error was unprecedented. Save you from what? Garrett and Thalia exchanged glances. From the end of everything, Thalia said simply. Before I could ask more, the door opened again, and Hammond returned. His ancient face was grave. The pack is in an uproar, he reported. Word of the Luna mark has spread. They're calling it a miracle. Some are calling it a deception. Let them talk, Garrett said dismissively. Hammond cleared his throat. There's more. 3 wolves have come forward to recant their testimony against Alara. They claim Victor persuaded them to lie about seeing her with the Bloodfang scouts. The temperature in the room seemed to drop. Garrett went very still, the kind of stillness that precedes violence. Find Victor, he said, each word precise and deadly. Bring him to me. Hammond bowed and hurried out. Garrett turned back to me, and for a moment I saw something almost like regret in his silver eyes. It appears I owe you an apology. Dutchy, he said stiffly, a grave injustice has been done to you. An apology. From an alpha who had ruled for 2 centuries without ever admitting fault. It should have felt like victory. Instead, it felt like standing on the edge of a cliff, unsure whether I was about to fly or fall. Why would Victor want me dead, I asked. Garrett's jaw tightened. That is what I intend to discover. Thalia, who had been quietly observing, suddenly chuckled. Oh, I think it's rather obvious, isn't it? Victor has been your shadow for how long, Garrett? A century? More? Always the faithful friend, the loyal advisor. And then, this girl appears with the mark Victor has heard you search for across 2 centuries. The mark that would bind you to another in ways Victor could never compete with. I looked between them, confused. Bind, what do you mean? The Luna mark is more than just a sign, Thalia explained. It's a covenant. The marked one and the alpha become connected. There are strengths and fates intertwined. In the old stories, they were unstoppable together. Separately, vulnerable. Victor knew this, Garrett said quietly. He's heard the legends as often as I have. If the Bloodfang Alpha discovered you bore the mark, he would try to claim you instead, Thalia finished. The power of the Luna mark paired with an alpha is considerable. My head spun. 2 days ago, I had been ordinary. Today, I was marked by the moon goddess, apparently valuable enough to kill, powerful enough to fear. None of it made sense. Why me? I whispered. I'm no one special. Thalia patted my hand. Oh, child, the goddess doesn't make mistakes. If she marked you, there's a reason. I've been searching for the Luna-marked wolf for over 200 years, Garrett said, his voice distant, as if he was speaking more to himself than to me. After the Great War with the Forgotten Ones, after the barriers between worlds began to weaken, The prophecies said the mark would appear again when the breaking was near. The breaking? I asked. The end of separation between our world and theirs, Talia said grimly. The forgotten ones are not truly gone. They are merely temporal contained, and the barriers grow thinner every year. A shiver ran through me, though I wasn't cold. Who are the forgotten ones? Monsters, Garrett said flatly. Creatures of darkness that feed on chaos and pain. They nearly destroyed the world once, long ago. It took the combined strength of all wolf packs and the sacrifice of the last Luna mark to seal them away. I stared at him. Sacrifice? Thalia shot him a warning look. That's enough history for tonight. You need rest, your body has undergone a significant transformation. The mark changes more than just your skin. As if to emphasize her point, a wave of exhaustion swept through me. My eyelids suddenly weighed 1,000 pounds. Garrett seemed to notice, nodding to Thalia. Postguards outside, he told her. Wolves you trust implicitly. No one enters without my permission. Thalia rolled her eyes. I've been guarding important wolves since before you were born, pup. I know what to do. A ghost of a smile touched Garrett's lips. Of course. He turned to leave, then paused at the door, looking back at me. For a moment, something vulnerable crossed his face, an emotion I couldn't name. I am sorry, he said, the words clearly uncomfortable on his tongue, for what nearly happened. Before I could respond, he was gone. Thalia lingered, checking my pulse and peering into my eyes. Interesting, she murmured. What is? He spent 2 centuries searching for you. I wonder if he's prepared for what it means to actually find you. She patted my hand. Rest now. Tomorrow, your new life begins. As she left, I touched the crescent mark on my collarbone. It was warm, like a living thing, and it seemed to pulse with my heartbeat. A covenant, Thalia had called it. A binding between me and Garrett. I closed my eyes, exhaustion claiming me. Just before sleep took me completely, a strange sensation washed through me, a feeling of something shifting aside, awakening, unfurling like a flower reaching for the sun. And with it came knowledge I shouldn't have possessed. Garrett, standing alone on a balcony, staring at the moon, his thoughts a storm of confusion and longing. I sat bolt upright, heart pounding. I hadn't imagined it. Somehow I had felt his emotions, seen through his eyes. What had the mark done to me? The next 3 days passed in a blur of tests and questions. Thalia examined me from head to toe, muttering ancient words and consulting texts so old they crumbled at the edges. Hammond brought historical records of previous Luna-marked wolves, reading aloud accounts of their abilities and fates, while I listened with growing unease. Each story ended the same way. Sacrifice. My father was permitted to visit briefly. He held me tightly, tears streaming into his beard. I never doubted you, he whispered, not for a moment. Garrett kept his distance, but I felt him watching. The strange connection between us grew stronger. Sometimes I would catch glimpses of his thoughts or emotions, brief flashes like lightning illuminating a dark landscape. I wondered if he experienced the same thing, if he could sense my fear, my confusion, my growing anger at being kept in the dark about my own fate. On the 4th day, I woke before dawn with a burning need to run. My wolf, usually so quiet and compliant, clawed at the inside of my skin, demanding freedom. I slipped past the guards, surprisingly easy, as if they couldn't quite see me when I didn't wish to be seen, and made my way to the forest. The shift came easier than it ever had before. One moment I was human, the next my wolf form burst free, larger and stronger than she had ever been. My fur was no longer the dull brown it had always been, but silver white, glowing faintly in the pre-dawn darkness. The mark remained visible, a crescent of golden light on my shoulder. I ran, reveling in the speed and power of my new form. Trees blurred past me. Scents I had never noticed before filled my nose. The sweet decay of a fallen log, the lingering musk of a deer that had passed hours ago, the sharp tang of pine sap high above my head. Every sense was heightened, every movement more graceful and sure. For the first time since the pyre, I felt free, wild, alive. I was so lost in the joy of running that I almost missed the scent. Rich, dominant, unmistakably alpha. Garrett. He was following me, his own massive silver-gray wolf form moving through the trees with practiced stealth. I should have been afraid. He was bigger, stronger, the alpha. But my wolf felt no fear, only a strange, wild exhilaration. I changed direction, leading him deeper into the forest, testing my new speed against his experience. It became a game, a chase, a dance. I would let him get close, then dart away, leaving him to follow. My wolf laughed inside, delighted with this new power, this new dynamic between us. Finally, I broke into a clearing where a stream cut through the forest. I stopped, turning to face him as he emerged from the trees. In wolf form, Garrett was magnificent. His silver-gray coat rippled over muscles honed by centuries of dominance. His eyes remained silver, glowing with intelligence and power. We regarded each other across the clearing, neither submitting, neither advancing. An impasse that would have been unthinkable before the mark. The shift back to human form came as naturally as breathing. One moment we were wolves, the next we stood as humans in the dawn light. I had no clothes, but neither did he, and strangely I felt no shame. The mark on my collarbone glowed faintly, reflecting in his silver eyes. "You left your guards," he said, his voice a low rumble. "I needed to run. You could have been killed. Victor is still out there." I lifted my chin. "I'm stronger now." "Yes," he agreed, his eyes traveling over me with an intensity that should have made me uncomfortable, but instead sent a different kind of heat through my veins. "But still untrained, still vulnerable." "Then train me." The words came out as a challenge. Something like surprise flickered across his face, followed by consideration. "Is that what you want?" "I want to understand what's happening to me. I want to know why the moon goddess chose me. I want to know what I'm meant to do with this." I touched the mark. "No more secrets, Garrett. No more half-truths." He was silent for a long moment, studying me. I felt him testing the edges of our connection, probing the bond that was growing between us. Finally, he nodded. "Very well, no more secrets." He gestured to a flat rock beside the stream. "Sit. This will take some time." As the sun rose, painting the clearing in gold and amber, Garrett told me everything. He spoke of the ancient war 500 years ago, when the barriers between worlds weakened and the Forgotten Ones slipped through, creatures of nightmare and shadow, led by their king Abaddon. "He was once like us," Garrett said, "a wolf, an alpha, but he craved power beyond what our world could give him. He found ways to extend his life, to enhance his strength, all at terrible cost. He sacrificed his own pack, one by one, draining their life force to fuel his magic." I shuddered at the thought. How was he defeated? The last Luna marked. Dumliathis Lunamark, a wolf named Ariana discovered a way to seal the barriers. With the combined power of all the alpha wolves, she created a ritual that would close the gaps between worlds. But it required sacrifice. "Her life," I said quietly. Garrett nodded. "Her essence became the seal itself, her spirit eternally vigilant, keeping the barriers intact. And now the barriers are weakening again. Yes, for decades I've sensed it. Strange occurrences, glimpses of things that shouldn't exist in our world. The prophecies said, when the breaking was near, the moon goddess would choose another marked one to strengthen the seal. I absorbed this in silence, watching the play of light on the water. So I'm meant to sacrifice myself like Ariana did." "That is what the prophecies suggest," Garrett admitted, his voice carefully neutral. "And that's why you've been searching for the Luna marked, to find someone to sacrifice?" His eyes flashed. "I've been searching because without the Luna marked, all worlds fall. Everything ends. Not just our pack, not just wolves, everything." "Convenient that it wasn't you who was marked," I couldn't help saying. To my surprise, he laughed, a short, harsh sound without humor. "You think I haven't considered that? You think I haven't spent 2 centuries wondering why the burden falls to another and not to me? I am the alpha. It should be my sacrifice to make." The raw honesty in his voice caught me off guard. For a moment, I glimpsed the weight he carried. 2 centuries of leadership, of responsibility, of searching for someone whose fate was to die so others could live. "I didn't ask for this mark," I said softly. "No one worthy of it ever would." His eyes held mine. "The question now is, what will you do with it?" Before I could answer, a howl cut through the morning air, an alert, a warning. Garrett was on his feet instantly, his body tensing. "That's Marcus," he said, naming his most trusted warrior. "Something's wrong." We shifted back to wolf form in perfect unison, as if we'd been running together for years rather than minutes. He led the way, and I followed, our paws eating up the distance back to the pack grounds. I felt his concern bleeding through our connection, sharp and focused. As we neared the territory, the scent hit me. Blood and fear and something else. Something wrong. Not wolf, not human, but something other. My hackles rose, a growl building in my throat. We broke through the tree line to chaos. The pack grounds were in disarray, wolves running in all directions, some in human form, others as wolves. At the center of the commotion, a circle of warriors surrounded something. I couldn't see what it was, but the stench of wrongness emanated from that spot. Garrett shifted to human form, and I followed suit. Someone threw clothes to us, and we dressed quickly. "Report!" Garrett barked at Marcus, who stood guard at the edge of the circle. "Found it at the eastern border," Marcus said grimly. "It killed 2 patrol wolves before we could take it down. Never seen anything like it." Garrett pushed through the ring of warriors, and I followed close behind. In the center lay a creature that made my blood run cold. It was shaped like a wolf, but wrong, its limbs too long, its muzzle too short, its eyes too large and entirely black. Its fur was patchy, revealing gray skin beneath that seemed to shift and move of its own accord. "Is it dead?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. As if in answer, the creature's head snapped toward me, those black eyes fixing on my face with terrible intelligence. It was gravely wounded, black ichor oozing from multiple gashes, but still alive. "The marked one," it hissed, its voice like stones grinding together. "He will come for you." Garrett moved with blinding speed, his hand closing around the creature's throat. Who? Who sent you?" The creature's mouth stretched into something like a smile, revealing rows of needle-sharp teeth. "The king returns. The breaking comes." Its black eyes remain fixed on me. "He remembers the last one. He will savor breaking you as he did her." Garrett's hand tightened, but before he could end the creature, it convulsed. Its body seemed to collapse in on itself, dissolving into a puddle of that black ichor which quickly soaked into the ground, leaving nothing behind. A shocked silence fell over the gathered wolves. "What was that thing?" someone finally asked. "A scout," Garrett said grimly, "from beyond the barrier." He turned to Hammond. "Call the pack council now and send messengers to the allied packs. They need to know." As the warriors dispersed to carry out his orders, Garrett turned to me, his expression grave. "It's beginning," he said quietly, "sooner than I feared. The breaking is coming, and Abaddon knows you bear the mark." I looked down at my hands, which were trembling slightly. The mark on my collarbone burned, as if responding to the threat. "What happens now?" I asked. Garrett's eyes met mine, silver and unyielding. "Now we prepare for war, and I train you to become what you were marked to be." "And if I don't want this fate, this sacrifice?" Something softened in his expression, just for a moment. "Then we find another way. Together." He held out his hand to me. After a moment's hesitation, I took it. The moment our skin touched, the mark flared bright, sending a surge of warmth through my body. In that instant, I felt everything he felt. His determination, his fear, his growing respect for me, and something deeper, something neither of us was ready to name. As we walked back toward the pack grounds, surrounded by wary, respectful wolves, I realized how completely my life had changed in less than a week. From ordinary to marked, from accused traitor to prophesied savior, from condemned to die to destined for sacrifice. But looking at Garrett's profile, stern and unyielding in the morning light, I made a silent promise to myself. I would not follow Ariana's path without question. I would find my own way, my own fate, even if it meant challenging the will of the moon goddess herself. The pack council convened in the Great Hall, an ancient structure of stone and massive timber beams. The 12 oldest and most respected members of the pack sat around a circular table, with Garrett at their head. I stood beside him, aware of the weight of history in that room, of traditions older than any living wolf. Hammond read from the ancient chronicles, his voice rising and falling as he recounted the first breaking, the war with the forgotten ones, the sacrifice of Ariana. The council listened in grave silence, many of them hearing the full truth for the first time. "For 5 centuries the seal has held," Hammond concluded. "But the prophecies were clear. The breaking would come again." "And now it has," Garrett said, laying a hand flat on the table. "The creature we found today was a harbinger. Where one scout has passed through, others will follow. And eventually Abaddon himself will find a way." Thalia, who sat 3 seats from Garrett, cleared her throat. "The Luna mark appears in times of great need. The goddess has chosen." She nodded toward me. "Alara bears the mark. The question is not whether the breaking comes, but how we respond." An older wolf named Gregory leaned forward. "The histories are clear. To seal the breach requires sacrifice. The marked one must give herself to strengthen the barriers, as Ariana did before. That is one interpretation, Hammond said carefully. Gregory's eyes narrowed. Is there another? The prophecies speak of sacrifice, yes, Hammond admitted, but they also speak of balance, of the union between the Alpha and the marked one. Union? I asked, speaking for the first time since the council began. Hammond exchanged glances with Talia. The Luna mark creates a bond between the marked one and their Alpha, he explained. The nature of that bond depends on the wolves themselves. In some cases, it has been mentor and student. In others, more. When the Alpha and the marked one are truly united in purpose and spirit, Thalia added, their power is magnified. The histories speak of healing beyond anything a normal wolf could accomplish, of strength and speed that defied explanation. And Ariana, I pressed, was she united with her Alpha? A heavy silence fell. No, Hammond finally said. Her Alpha rejected the bond, feared it would diminish his power. Without that unity, Ariana had only her own strength to draw upon when facing Abaddon. It was enough to create the seal, but at the cost of her essence. I felt Garrett stiffen beside me, felt a surge of emotion through our connection. Anger, regret, determination. I am not that Alpha, he said, his voice carrying to every corner of the hall. I will not reject the bond. I will not abandon the marked one to face this alone. His words sent a ripple of surprise through the council and a different kind of warmth through me. Our eyes met, and for a moment everything else seemed to fade away. The mark pulsed between us, strengthening with each heartbeat. The moment was broken by the hall doors slamming open. Marcus strode in, his expression grim. Forgive the interruption, he said, bowing quickly to the council, but we found something you need to see. We followed him to the pack's borders, where a group of warriors stood guard around a section of the forest. The trees were wrong, twisted and blackened, as if burned from the inside out. The ground beneath them was cracked, a dark ichor seeping from the breaks like infected blood from a wound. It's spreading, Marcus reported. Started where that creature disappeared. Grows a little each hour. Garrett approached the edge of the affected area, careful not to touch the blackened trees. This is how it begins, he said quietly. The corruption of our world. The forgotten ones seep through the weakened barriers like poison. I stepped up beside him, drawn by some instinct I didn't understand. The mark on my collarbone burned painfully, reacting to the wrongness before us. Can it be contained? I asked. For a time, Talia replied, but not indefinitely. The corruption will spread, slowly at first, then faster as the barriers weaken further. How long do we have? Garrett's eyes met mine. Months, perhaps. Less if Abaddon finds a way to accelerate the breaking. Then we don't have time to waste, I said, surprising myself with the steel in my voice. You said you would train me. When do we start? A faint smile touched his lips. Now. The next days blurred into a punishing routine. Dawn to dusk, I trained with Garrett and the pack's best warriors. They taught me to fight as a wolf and as a human, to use speed and cunning to overcome larger opponents, to harness the new strength granted by the mark. Thalia worked with me on other skills, how to sense the barriers between worlds, how to detect the corruption of the forgotten ones, how to use the mark's power to heal. Under her guidance, I learned to mend broken bones and close wounds with nothing but touch and will. Each time I used the mark's power, it grew easier, more natural, like flexing a muscle I never knew I possessed. But the most difficult training happened in the quiet hours of night, when Garrett and I retreated to the Alpha's private chambers to work on strengthening our bond. We would sit facing each other, the mark glowing between us, and deliberately open ourselves to the connection. The first attempts were awkward, uncomfortable. Neither of us was used to such vulnerability. Garrett had spent centuries building walls around his thoughts and emotions, ruling the pack with controlled strength. I had always been reserved, keeping my true self hidden behind the quiet facade of the record-keeper's daughter. But gradually we learned to navigate each other's minds. I felt his memories wash over me, centuries of leadership, of hard decisions and sleepless nights. I saw through his eyes as he fought in human wars, volunteering whenever wolf strength and speed could make a difference without revealing their existence. I felt his bone-deep loneliness, the isolation of living for centuries while those around him aged and died. He, in turn, experienced my shorter life, my childhood love of books and stories, my quiet observations of the pack's politics, my secret dreams of adventure beyond the life planned for me, my hurt and betrayal at being condemned without a fair hearing. I was wrong about you, he admitted one night, as we sat in the golden glow of the mark. I saw only what I expected to see, the quiet record keeper's daughter. I never looked deeper. Few did, I replied. It was easier to be overlooked. His eyes, silver in the dim light, held mine. I see you now. The simple words carried a weight that made my heart beat faster. The bond between us had grown from the initial spark into something more complex, more profound. I felt his presence in the back of my mind constantly now, a warm weight that was somehow comforting rather than intrusive. During the days as we trained together, our movements became increasingly synchronized. We anticipated each other's actions without words, moved as a single unit in mock battle. The warriors watched with a mixture of awe and unease, recognizing something beyond normal alpha power. The histories didn't exaggerate, Hammond commented one afternoon, watching as Garrett and I sparred, neither gaining advantage over the other despite his centuries of experience. The Alpha and the Luna marked, united in purpose. There hasn't been such a pairing in 500 years. It's not enough, Garrett said, helping me up after a particularly intense round. Not yet. The Forgotten Ones grow stronger by the day. He was right. The corruption had spread, now covering several acres of forest. Strange sightings were reported by the border patrols, shadowy figures that vanished when approached, animals with too many limbs or eyes, plants that moved with apparent purpose. Twice more we encountered scouts like the first one, and each time they dissolved into that black ichor before we could learn more. But it was Victor we truly feared. He had disappeared the night the mark appeared, vanishing from packed territory without a trace. The search patrols found nothing, not even a scent trail to follow. He knows too much, Garrett said grimly during a council meeting, about our defenses, our alliances, our weaknesses. You think he's gone to Abaddon, I said. It wasn't a question. I think Victor has always craved power. If he believes Abaddon can offer him more than I can. Garrett left the thought unfinished. The council murmured uneasily. The idea of a wolf, especially one who had been the Alpha's closest advisor, betraying their kind to the Forgotten Ones was almost unthinkable. We must assume the worst, Talia said firmly. Victor knows about the Luna mark. He knows the prophecies. If he's allied with Abaddon, we must move more quickly than planned. The allied pacts have been informed, Hammond reported. They're sending representatives. Good, Garrett nodded. We'll need them all if we're to face what's coming. After the council dispersed, Garrett and I walked together along the ridge that gave the pack its name. The night was clear, stars scattered like diamond dust across the sky. The full moon hung low on the horizon, its light silvering the landscape. Are you afraid? I asked him, breaking a comfortable silence. He considered the question seriously, as he did everything. Yes, he finally said. Not of dying. I've lived long enough that death holds little terror. I'm afraid of failing, of watching our world fall to the corruption. I nodded, understanding. I'm afraid of the sacrifice, I admitted, of becoming like Ariana, bound to the seal for eternity. Garrett stopped walking, turning to face me. The moonlight caught in his silver hair, making him look otherworldly, ancient and young at once. I won't let that happen, he said fiercely. We'll find another way. The prophecies can be interpreted in many ways, he interrupted. Hammond has been searching the oldest texts, looking for alternatives, and our bond is stronger than Ariana had with her Alpha. That has to count for something. I wanted to believe him, wanted to believe there was a future beyond the breaking, beyond the sacrifice. But even as he spoke, I felt the weight of destiny pressing down on me, inexorable as the tide. What if there is no other way? I asked softly. Garrett's expression hardened. Then we face it together. Whatever comes, whatever price must be paid, you won't face it alone. He reached out, his fingers tracing the curve of the mark on my collarbone. At his touch, it flared bright, sending waves of warmth through my body. Our bond opened wide, emotions flowing freely between us, his determination and protective fury, my fear and growing resolve, and beneath it all, something deeper taking root. Something neither of us had anticipated when the mark first appeared. I never thought I'd find you, he said quietly. After 2 centuries of searching, I'd begun to believe the Luna mark was just a legend, a false hope. And now that you've found me, his eyes, silver as the moon above us, held mine. Now I understand why the wait was necessary, why it had to be you. The moment stretched between us, taut with unspoken possibilities. I felt his desire through our bond, matched by my own growing feelings for him, feelings that had evolved from fear to respect to something far more complicated. Before either of us could act on those feelings, a howl split the night, the alert signal from the Border Patrol. Garrett tensed, his head turning toward the sound. "That's not a standard alert," he said, already moving. "Something's very wrong." We ran together down the ridge, shifting to wolf form as we went. Through our bond, I felt his focus narrow to razor sharpness, all other thoughts submerged beneath the instinct to protect his pack. My own wolf responded, matching his pace as we raced toward the eastern border, toward the corruption. The scent hit us before we arrived. Blood and fear and that terrible wrongness, but stronger now, concentrated. We found Marcus and his patrol backing slowly away from the edge of the corrupted zone. In the center of the blackened trees stood a figure that made my blood run cold. Victor. But not as he had been. His body was twisted, elongated, his skin mottled with patches of that same gray, shifting substance we'd seen on the scouts. His eyes were completely black, reflecting the moonlight like pools of oil. "Garrett," he said, his voice both familiar and terribly changed. "And the marked one. How convenient." Garrett shifted back to human form, and I followed, never taking my eyes off Victor. "What have you done to yourself?" Garrett asked, horror and pity mingling in his voice. Victor smiled, revealing teeth that had become sharp, needle-like. "I've evolved, accepted the gift Abaddon offers to those who serve him willingly." "You've corrupted yourself," Garrett said, "betrayed everything our kind stands for." "Our kind?" Victor laughed, a sound like breaking glass. "Our kind has followed you blindly for centuries, content with scraps of power, hiding in the shadows of the human world. Abaddon offers more, so much more." He took a step forward, and the warriors growled warnings. Victor ignored them, his black eyes fixed on me. "He's very interested in you," Bryce told me. "The new Luna marked. He remembers the last one quite fondly, says her screams were exquisite." Garrett moved in front of me, a low growl building in his chest. "You won't touch her." "I don't need to," Victor said, still smiling that terrible smile. "I just needed to see you both, to confirm what the scouts reported. The bond between you is progressing nicely." His head tilted, like a bird studying a worm. "He'll be so pleased. It makes the breaking so much more satisfying when there are genuine feelings involved." "What do you mean?" I demanded, stepping up beside Garrett despite his protective stance. Victor's smile widened. "You don't understand yet, do you? The sacrifice, the seal, it's all part of his plan. Has been from the beginning. Why do you think the first breaking happened? Why do you think Ariana had to bind herself to the seal? He wanted it that way." "You're lying," Garrett said flatly. "Am I?" Victor's black eyes gleamed. "Ask your historians. Ask them what happened to the soul bound to the seal. Ask them why the breaking always returns, why the cycle repeats. Abaddon doesn't want to destroy the world, Garrett. He wants to feed on it. And the suffering of a Luna-marked wolf, bound for eternity, watching helplessly as her world is slowly corrupted, that's the sweetest feast of all." A chill ran down my spine. There was truth in his words. I could feel it. Not the whole truth, but enough to cast doubt on everything we'd believed. "Why are you telling us this?" I asked. "Because it changes nothing," Victor said simply. "The breaking comes. The corruption spreads. You'll sacrifice yourself to renew the seal, thinking you are saving everyone. And the cycle will continue, as it has for millennia." He stepped back toward the corrupted trees. "He asked me to deliver a message. He's looking forward to meeting you, Alara. He says your pain will taste even sweeter than Ariana's." Before Garrett could respond, Victor melted backward into the shadows of the twisted trees, his laughter lingering in the air like a stain. The warriors looked to Garrett for orders, but he stood frozen, his face a mask of contained fury and dawning horror. Through our bond, I felt his thoughts racing, connecting pieces of history and prophecy in new, disturbing patterns. "Garrett?" I touched his arm. "What did he mean? About Abaddon wanting the seal?" He turned to me, his silver eyes troubled. "I don't know, but I intend to find out." He looked to Marcus. "Double the patrols. No one approaches the corruption alone. No one." As we walked back toward the pack grounds, the weight of Victor's revelations hung between us. If what he said was true, if the seal and the sacrifice were somehow part of Abaddon's plan, not a defense against him, then everything we thought we knew was wrong. "We need to speak with Hammond and Thalia," Garrett said grimly. "We need to know the whole truth, not just the stories we've been told." I nodded, feeling the mark on my collarbone burn with renewed intensity. My fate, already uncertain, now seemed darker than ever. Not a heroic sacrifice to save my world, but a piece in a game played by a creature of nightmare. But as we walked, Garrett's hand found mine, his fingers intertwining with my own. Through our bond, I felt his determination and his unspoken promise. Whatever the truth, whatever the loss, we would face it together. The future might be uncertain, the breaking inevitable, but one thing had become clear to both of us. The bond between us was no accident. The moon goddess had chosen me for Garrett and him for me. And together, perhaps, we could find a way to break the cycle that had claimed Ariana, and who knew how many Luna-marked wolves before her. For the first time since the mark had appeared on my skin, I felt something like hope. Again. Garrett's voice cut through the pre-dawn air, leaving no room for argument. My muscles screamed in protest as I pushed myself up from the dirt for what felt like the 100th time. We'd been training since midnight, long after the rest of the pack had retreated to their beds. I need a moment, I gasped, my breath forming clouds in the cold air. Garrett's silver eyes narrowed. Abaddon won't give you a moment. I knew he was right, but that didn't make my exhaustion any less real. 2 weeks had passed since Victor's transformation and his chilling revelation about the true purpose of the seal. 2 weeks of relentless training, of pushing my body and mind beyond limits I hadn't known existed. The Luna mark had granted me new strength, new speed, but mastering these gifts was another matter entirely. Your stance is wrong, Garrett said, circling me like the predator he was. You're fighting like a human, thinking too much. Let your wolf guide you. I closed my eyes, reaching for that other part of myself. Since the mark appeared, my wolf had grown stronger, more present. No longer a separate entity I called upon during shifts, but a constant companion, eager to share her instincts if I would only listen. When I opened my eyes, Garrett was lunging toward me. Time seemed to slow. Instead of overthinking my response, I surrendered to the wolf's instincts. My body moved with fluid grace, sidestepping his attack and countering with a strike of my own. My fist connected with his shoulder, and I felt the impact reverberate through both of us. Garrett's eyes widened in surprise, then darkened with something like approval. Better. It was the closest thing to praise I'd received all night. Through our strengthening bond, I felt his satisfaction, carefully contained but unmistakable. That connection between us had deepened over the past weeks, becoming a constant awareness that hummed beneath my skin. I knew when he was near without seeing him, could sense his moods, sometimes catch fragments of his thoughts. It should have been invasive, but instead felt strangely right, as though a part of me that had always been empty was finally filled. Again, he said, but this time the word carried a different weight. We circled each other in the small clearing, both of us barefoot in the cool dirt. The moon hung low in the western sky, preparing to surrender to the approaching dawn. Its light silvered Garrett's hair, making him look otherworldly. For a moment, I glimpsed what humans must see when they encountered him, something ancient and dangerous and not entirely mortal. This time when we clashed, it was less like combat and more like a dance. I anticipated his movements before he made them, just as he seemed to read mine. Strike and counter, advance and retreat, our bodies moving in perfect harmony. Through our bond, I felt his approval growing, and beneath it, something warmer and more complicated that neither of us was ready to name. We broke apart, both breathing hard, though I knew his elevated heart rate had little to do with physical exertion. 2 centuries of discipline couldn't completely hide the desire I sensed through our connection. It mirrored my own, a heat that built between us each time we touched, each time we opened ourselves to the bond. You're learning, he said, his voice rough. I have a good teacher. His eyes met mine, and for a moment, the pretense of training fell away. We stood as equals in the clearing, the air between us charged with possibility. I took a step toward him, drawn by something stronger than conscious thought. The moment shattered as a howl split the night, the alert from the perimeter guards. Garrett's head snapped toward the sound, all softness vanishing from his expression. That's the western border, he said, already moving. The corruption is spreading. We shifted in unison, clothes discarded without thought. In wolf form, we ran side by side through the forest, silver gray and pure white, alpha and Luna marked. I matched his pace effortlessly, my new strength making light work of the terrain. Through our bond, I felt his focus, his fear for his pack, and his grim determination. The stench hit us before we cleared the tree line, that unmistakable wrongness that marked the corruption's advance. The Western Border Patrol had formed a line, wolves in both human and animal form, facing a section of forest that made my hackles rise. The trees were warped, branches twisted at unnatural angles. The ground beneath them oozed black ichor, and the air seemed to shimmer with a sickly green light. We shifted back to human form as Marcus approached, his expression grim. "Started about an hour ago," he reported, moving faster than the eastern breach. "3 wolves are already showing signs of sickness from getting too close." Garrett's jaw tightened. "Get Thalia, tell her to bring the purification herbs, and clear everyone back another 100 yards." As Marcus hurried to obey, I stared at the corrupted landscape. The mark on my collarbone burned, responding to the wrongness before us. Without thinking, I took a step forward. Garrett's hand closed around my arm. "Don't." "The mark is reacting to it," I said. "I can feel something, like it's calling to me." His grip tightened. "That's exactly why you need to keep your distance. Victor said Abaddon wants you. This could be a trap." I knew he was right, but the pull was undeniable. The mark throbbed in time with my heartbeat, urging me toward the corruption. I think I can sense the weakness in the barrier, the place where it's breaking through. Garrett studied me for a long moment, conflict clear in his silver eyes. Finally, he released my arm. "Show me," but we go together and we stop at the first sign of danger. Hand in hand, we approach the edge of the corrupted zone. The pack warriors watch with barely concealed alarm, no doubt questioning their alpha's judgment. But Garrett's focus was entirely on me and on the wrongness ahead of us. As we drew closer, the burning in my mark intensified. The golden crescent glowed visibly now, illuminating the darkness. I stopped about 20 feet from the first blackened tree, unable to go further. The air felt thick, resistant, as if reality itself objected to our presence. "There," I whispered, pointing to a spot between 2 twisted oaks. To ordinary eyes, there was nothing unusual about that particular section. It was all equally corrupted. But through the lens of the mark, I could see a tear in the fabric of the world, a wound leaking darkness into our reality. That's where it's coming through. Garrett couldn't see it, but he trusted my perception. "Can you close it?" I reached out with senses I hadn't possessed a month ago, probing the breach. It was like touching an open wound. Raw, pulsing, wrong. I don't know how, not yet. A rustle of movement drew our attention. Thalia approached, leaning on a gnarled walking stick, a leather bag slung over her shoulder. Her ancient eyes took in the scene, lingering on my glowing mark. "The corruption spreads faster than before," she said, her voice cracking like autumn leaves. "The forgotten ones grow stronger, more desperate. They sense the Luna mark has returned." "Elara can see the breach," Garrett told her, "the exact point where they're coming through." Thalia's eyes sharpened with interest. "The old texts speak of this, the marked one's sight, the ability to perceive the barriers between worlds." She fumbled in her bag, producing a small pouch. "This may help. Crushed moonstone and elderberry, blessed under the full moon. It will temporarily strengthen the local barrier, slow the corruption's spread." She handed the pouch to me. "Cast it at the breach point. Your mark will guide the magic." I took the pouch, feeling the weight of both the physical object and the responsibility it represented. Following instinct, I stepped as close to the breach as I dared, then tossed the contents toward the spot I'd identified. The powdery mixture hung in the air for a moment, glittering in the pre-dawn light, before being drawn toward the breach as if pulled by an invisible force. When the powder touched the tear, a flash of golden light erupted. The mark on my collarbone flared in response, sending a surge of heat through my body. For a moment, I felt connected to the barrier itself, could sense its ancient power and the strains placed upon it. I gasped as knowledge flooded my mind. Impressions of countless Luna-marked wolves before me, their lives, their sacrifices, their power feeding the seal that kept the worlds apart. And beneath it all, a hunger, ancient and terrible and patient. I stumbled backward, would have fallen if Garrett hadn't caught me. His arms encircled my waist, steadying me as the visions faded. "What did you see?" he asked, his voice low and urgent. I struggled to put the experience into words. "The others, the Luna-marked who came before, their power, it's part of the seal. But something's wrong." I shuddered, remembering the hunger I'd sensed. Victor was telling the truth. The seal doesn't just keep the forgotten ones out. It feeds on the essence of the Luna-marked. and something feeds on that power in turn. Garrett's expression darkened. Abaddon. We need to know more, I said, about the first breaking, about Ariana's sacrifice. There must be answers in the oldest texts. Hammond has been searching, Garrett replied, but many of the original records were lost during the Great War. The truth was deliberately obscured. By whom, I asked. By the Alphas who survived, Talia said quietly. Some histories are too dangerous to preserve in their entirety. The implications of that statement hung in the air between us. What had the ancient Alphas wanted to hide? What truths were so dangerous they needed to be erased from memory? The powder Thalia had given me seemed to be working. The sickly glow around the breach point had dimmed, and the oozing black ichor had slowed to a trickle. But we all knew it was a temporary measure at best. We can't keep fighting a defensive battle, Garrett said, watching the corruption with narrowed eyes. We need to take the fight to Abaddon. That would require crossing the barrier, Talia warned, entering his domain. No wolf has done that and returned unchanged, if they returned at all. Garrett's jaw set in a stubborn line I was coming to recognize. Then we'll be the first. I studied his profile in the growing light of dawn, sensing the weight of responsibility that drove him. 2 centuries of leadership had taught him that sometimes survival required risk. But this was more than risk. It was potentially suicide. The Allied packs arrive tomorrow, Talia reminded him. Perhaps they bring knowledge we lack. Garrett nodded reluctantly. We'll wait to hear what they have to say. His eyes met mine. But be ready. One way or another, this ends soon. As we walked back toward the pack grounds, the warriors fell in behind us, a silent procession through the awakening forest. I felt their eyes on my back, their mingled hope and fear. To them, I was either salvation or harbinger of doom, perhaps both. They're afraid, I said quietly to Garrett. They should be, he replied. Fear keeps wolves alert, keeps them alive. Are you afraid? He considered the question seriously as he did everything. Not of dying. I've lived long enough that the prospect holds little terror. His eyes met mine. I'm afraid of failing, of watching my pack, my world, fall to the corruption. What he didn't say, but what I felt through our bond, was his fear for me. The thought of my sacrifice, of my essence being bound to the seal for eternity, terrified him more than his own death ever could. That realization sent a warmth through me that had nothing to do with the Mark's power. When we reached the Alpha's quarters, Garrett paused at the door. Rest. The Allied Alphas will want to meet the Luna Marked when they arrive. You'll need your strength. I nodded, suddenly aware of the exhaustion weighing my limbs. The night's training followed by the encounter with the breach had drained me. But as I turned to go, Garrett caught my hand. Elara. My name in his mouth was like a prayer. Whatever comes, whatever we discover, you're not alone in this. The simple promise meant more than flowery declarations ever could. I squeezed his hand, feeling the strength in it, the centuries of power and control. I know. He released me reluctantly, his eyes following as I made my way into the small chambers that had been assigned to me after the Mark appeared. They were closer to the Alpha's quarters than was traditional, another sign of the unique bond forming between us. Inside, I found fresh clothes laid out in a basin of warm water for washing. Small comforts that someone, likely Lydia or one of the other pack females, had thoughtfully provided. I cleaned away the dirt and sweat of training, changed into the soft linen tunic and leggings, and fell into the bed. Sleep claimed me instantly, but it was not peaceful. Dreams came, vivid and disturbing. I stood in a vast, blighted landscape, the sky above a sickly green, the ground beneath my feet barren and cracked. In the distance, a mountain of black stone rose, its peak lost in swirling clouds. Power emanated from it, ancient and malevolent. Home, whispered a voice behind me, or it was before they stole it from us. I turned to find Victor standing there, but not as I'd last seen him. He was more changed, his body elongated, his skin mottled with patches of gray. His eyes were entirely black, reflecting nothing. This isn't real, I said, backing away. You're not really here. Victor smiled, revealing rows of needle-sharp teeth. Isn't it? Aren't I? The barriers between worlds grow thin, little Luna. Dreams become doorways. What do you want? To show you the truth, the price of the choice that lies before you. He gestured to our surroundings. This was once a paradise before the first Luna Mark created the seal, before your kind decided which reality deserved to exist and which deserved to be locked away. You're trying to manipulate me, I said, but doubt crept into my voice. The desolation around us felt too real, the air thick with ancient sorrow. Am I? Ask your precious Alpha about the war that came before the first breaking. Ask him what the wolf packs did to ensure their dominance. Ask him why the forgotten ones are forgotten. Before I could respond, the landscape shifted. We stood in a lush forest clearing, but something was wrong. The trees were different, taller with silver bark and leaves that shimmered with an internal light. The air was heavier, the scent unfamiliar yet strangely compelling. Before, Victor said simply, the scene changed again. Now the forest burned, wolves running between the trees, hunting, but not ordinary wolves, massive beasts with eyes that glowed with power and purpose. They pursued smaller creatures, lithe and fast, with skin that shifted and changed like quicksilver. The Great Purge, Victor continued, when your kind decided ours had no right to exist in the shared reality. These are lies, I insisted, but my certainty wavered. There was truth in what he showed me. I could feel it. Victor's black eyes fixed on mine. Are they? The Lunamark wasn't created to protect. It was created to conquer, to eradicate. We didn't break through into your world, Alara. We were driven from it. The dream began to fragment, the images swirling around me like leaves caught in a windstorm. Victor's voice followed me into the chaos. Ask your Alpha. Ask him what they did. Ask him what you're really fighting to preserve. I woke with a guap, my heart pounding. Sunlight streamed through the small window, indicating I'd slept most of the day. The mark on my collarbone burned, reacting to the lingering fragments of the dream. Had it been just a dream? Or had Victor somehow reached across the barriers to plant seeds of doubt in my mind? I pressed my hand to the mark, feeling its warmth against my palm. The power it granted was real, but what was its true purpose? Protection or subjugation? A knock at the door interrupted my troubled thoughts. I rose, still disoriented, and opened it to find Hammond standing in the corridor, his ancient face grave. The Allied Alphas have arrived, he announced. They've requested your presence in the Great Hall. Now? He nodded. Now. I followed Hammond through the winding corridors of the pack complex, using the time to compose myself. The dream lingered, Victor's accusations echoing in my mind. I needed answers, but this wasn't the time to voice such questions. Not with Allied Alphas waiting to assess the Lunamark. The Great Hall was filled to capacity when we arrived. Pack members lined the walls, while the most important wolves sat at the massive circular table in the center. Garrett occupied the largest chair, his posture rigid, his expression carefully neutral. Around the table sat 5 other alphas, each radiating the unmistakable power of their rank. All conversations ceased when I entered. 12 eyes turned to me, assessing, evaluating. I felt the weight of their scrutiny like a physical thing. Garrett rose. Alphas of the Allied packs, I present Alara, daughter of the Silver Ridge Wrecker Keeper, chosen by the Moon Goddess to bear the Lunamark. I stepped forward, keeping my chin high despite the intimidating audience. These were the most powerful wolves in the region, some nearly as old as Garrett himself. Their support would be crucial in the coming conflict. Show them, Garrett said softly. Understanding his request, I pulled the collar of my tunic aside, revealing the crescent mark. In the presence of so many alphas, it began to glow, responding to their collective power. A murmur ran through the assembled wolves. It's true, said a dark-haired alpha with olive skin and eyes the color of amber. The mark returns. As the prophecies foretold, added another, this one older, with silver streaking his red beard. When the breaking comes again. The largest of the alphas, a mountain of a man with skin the color of polished mahogany, leaned forward. I am Caden, alpha of the Black Mountain Pack. My ancestors fought in the first braiding. Our histories speak of the Lunamark's power. His eyes, dark as night, studied me. They say she could heal with a touch, sense the barriers between worlds, commune with the Moon Goddess herself. I met his gaze steadily. I'm still learning what the mark allows me to do. Time is not on our side, said the red-bearded alpha. My scouts report corruption spreading along our eastern borders. The Forgotten Ones grow bolder, sending more scouts through the weakening barriers. We've lost 3 wolves to the corruption in the past week, added the female alpha, the only woman among them. Her white blonde hair was cropped short, her blue eyes cold as ice. Their minds simply broke, as if what they saw on the other side of the barrier destroyed them. Garrett nodded grimly. The pattern is the same across all territories. The breaking accelerates. Then we must accelerate our preparations, Caden said. The histories are clear. To seal the breach, the Lunamarked must sacrifice. The histories are incomplete, Garrett interrupted, a dangerous edge to his voice. Hammond has been researching the oldest texts. There may be alternatives we haven't considered. The female alpha raised a pale eyebrow. Alternatives to the sacrifice? The seal requires power, Garrett. Power only the Lunamarked can provide. I'm aware of the traditional interpretation, Freya, but there are inconsistencies in the records. Deliberate omissions. Garrett's eyes swept the table. I believe the alphas who survived the first breaking hid certain truths. Truths that might change our understanding of the seal and the sacrifice it requires. A tense silence followed his words. I studied the faces around the table, noting the subtle shifts in expression. Some showed skepticism, others discomfort. But it was the flash of something like guilt in the oldest alpha's eyes that caught my attention. You know something, I said, addressing him directly, about the first breaking, about what really happened. All eyes turned to the ancient wolf. Magnus, alpha of the Stone Creek Pack, was rumored to be over 400 years old enough to have known wolves who fought in the original conflict. I know only what my grandfather told me, Magnus said carefully, and he was but a pup when the first breaking occurred. Tell us, Garrett commanded, his voice soft but allowing no refusal. Magnus sighed, suddenly looking every one of his centuries. The histories say the Forgotten Ones broke through from their realm into ours, that they sought to conquer, to corrupt. But my grandfather said there was more to the story. He paused as if weighing the consequences of continuing. He said the Forgotten Ones were once part of our world, that they were cast out, banished to the other realm by the first wolf packs. My dream flashed through my mind, Victor's words echoing Magnus's revelation. Why were they banished? They were different. Neither wolf nor human, but something in between. Shapeshifters of a kind, but without the stability of our dual nature. They could become anything, take any form. Some said they had no true form at all, that they were spirits given flesh. Magnus shook his head. They were feared, hunted, eventually driven to the fringes of the world, where the barriers were thinnest. And then, Garrett prompted, the great alphas of that time, 7 in number, united to create a spell that would seal them away forever in their own realm. But the magic required sacrifice, the life essence of a special wolf, one blessed by the moon goddess herself. The first Lunamarked, I whispered. Magnus nodded. Her name was Selene. She gave herself willingly to create the seal. But my grandfather said she wept as she did so, not for herself, but for the injustice that had led to that moment. The revelation hung in the air, heavy with implications. If the Forgotten Ones had been wronged, cast out from a world that was once theirs, did that change the nature of our conflict? Were we the villains of their story? This changes nothing, Freya said firmly. Whatever happened centuries ago, the Forgotten Ones are a threat now. The corruption spreads. Our packs are in danger. We must act. It changes everything, I countered. If the seal was created out of fear and prejudice rather than necessity, perhaps there's a better solution than eternal banishment. Perhaps there could be peace. Caden's laugh was without humor. Peace? With creatures that corrupt everything they touch? Have you seen what happens to the land, to the animals, to wolves who encounter them? There can be no coexistence with such beings. But what if that corruption is a result of their rage, their pain at being cast out, I pressed. What if it's not their nature but their circumstance? You sound dangerously sympathetic to our enemy, Freya observed, her blue eyes narrowing. I felt Garrett stiffen beside me, sensed his protective instinct rising. She sounds like someone seeking the whole truth before committing to a course of action, he said, his voice deceptively calm. Something we should all aspire to. The tension in the room was palpable. I realized I'd challenged centuries of belief, questioned the very foundation of Wolfpack history. But the dream had shaken me, and Magnus's confirmation of Victor's claims only deepened my unease. Regardless of ancient history, the olive-skinned alpha said, breaking the tense silence, we face a present danger. The corruption spreads, the barriers weaken, we must act, and soon. Antonio's right, Garrett acknowledged. Whatever the truth of the first breaking, we cannot allow the corruption to consume our territories. He turned to me. Elara has identified a way to temporarily strengthen the local barriers. A mixture of moonstone and elderberry, blessed under the full moon. Thalia, who had been silent until now, stepped forward from her position against the wall. It buys us time, but little more. The next full moon is in 3 days. We can prepare a larger ritual then, one that might slow the corruption across all territories. And then, Caden demanded, these are stopgap measures at best. Then we continue searching for a better answer than simply repeating the past, Garrett said firmly. I will not consign Alara to an eternity bound to the seal without exploring every alternative. I felt a rush of gratitude toward him, tempered by the knowledge that time was running out. The breaking accelerated daily. The corruption spread. Eventually, a decision would have to be made. 3 days, Freya said. We will participate in your ritual, but if it fails to significantly slow the breaking, we must pursue the traditional solution. Her cold eyes found mine. The needs of the many outweigh the desires of one wolf, Luna marked or not. The meeting continued, the alphas discussing logistics, sharing reports from their territories, planning defensive strategies. I listened, but my mind kept returning to Magnus's revelation and my troubling dream. There were still missing pieces, still truths hidden beneath centuries of carefully curated history. When the council finally adjourned, the alphas departed to quarters prepared for them, leaving Garrett and me alone in the great hall. He turned to me, silver eyes searching my face. You're troubled, he observed. I had a dream, I admitted. Victor came to me, showed me visions of the past. He said the forgotten ones were driven from our world, not the other way around. Garrett's expression darkened, and now Magnus confirms it. Convenient timing. You think Victor knew we'd discover the truth? I think Abaddon is playing a long game, one that involves sowing doubt, turning us against each other. His hand found mine, warm and solid. Don't let him succeed, Alara. Whatever the truth of the first breaking, the forgotten ones as they exist now are dangerous. The corruption they spread destroys everything it touches. I nodded, knowing he was right, but couldn't shake my unease. There's still more we don't know. About the seal, about the sacrifice, about Abaddon himself. Hammond continues his research, and I've sent runners to the oldest pack territories, seeking any records that might have survived from that time. He squeezed my hand gently. We'll find answers. But both of us knew time was running short. The full moon ritual might buy us days, perhaps weeks, but eventually the breaking would continue. And then what? Would I sacrifice myself as Selene and Ariana had before me? Bind my essence to a seal created out of fear and prejudice? Become part of a cycle that seemed to feed Abaddon's power rather than contain it? Come, Garrett said, interrupting my troubled thoughts. There's something I want to show you. He led me through the pack complex, up winding stone stairs I'd never ascended before, until we emerged on a high balcony overlooking the entire Silver Ridge territory. The view was breathtaking, forests stretching to distant mountains, a river cutting through the valley below, the last light of sunset painting everything in gold and amber. This is where I come to think, Garrett said, leaning against the stone balustrade, to remember what I'm fighting to protect. I joined him, feeling the cool stone beneath my hands, the breeze against my face. From this height, there was no sign of the corruption, no hint of the danger approaching from beyond the barriers, just the beauty of the world, wild and perfect. It's worth protecting, I said softly, no matter what happened centuries ago. Garrett's eyes met mine, silver in the fading light. Yes, but not at any cost. Not at the cost of perpetuating a cycle that feeds our enemy rather than defeats him. The honesty in his voice, the determination in his eyes sent a wave of emotion through me. This wolf who had lived for centuries, who had seen civilizations rise and fall, who had carried the burden of leadership longer than most lives lasted, he was willing to question everything he'd believed to protect his pack. To protect me. We'll find another way, I promised, though I had no idea what that might be. His hand covered mine on the stone balustrade. Together. The simple word held such weight, such meaning. Together. Not alpha and subordinate, not savior and saved. Partners. The connection between us hummed, stronger than ever. Through our bond, I felt his emotions, his determination, his fear for his pack, and beneath it all, a growing feeling he couldn't quite name. Or wouldn't. We stood in silence as darkness fell, stars emerging in the velvet sky. The moon, nearly full, rose above the distant mountains, bathing the world in silver light. My mark responded, a pleasant warmth spreading across my collarbone. The mark grows stronger with the moon, I observed. Garrett nodded. As does the bond between us. His eyes held mine. Do you feel it? Always, I admitted. Like you're a part of me now. a part I never knew was missing. Something shifted in his expression, a softening around the eyes, a vulnerability few would ever witness from the Alpha. For 2 centuries, I searched for the Luna marked. I believed I sought only to fulfill the prophecy, to protect the pack from the breaking. His voice dropped lower. I never imagined it would be like this. Like what? I asked, though I felt the answer through our bond. Instead of replying with words, he reached out, his fingers tracing the curve of the mark on my collarbone. At his touch, it flared bright, sending waves of warmth through my body. Our bond opened wide, emotions flowing freely between us. His centuries of loneliness, my lifetime of feeling apart from the pack, and the growing realization that perhaps we had been meant to find each other all along. Ilara, he said, my name a prayer on his lips. The moment stretched between us, taut with possibility. I felt his desire through our bond, matched by my own growing feelings for him, feelings that had evolved from fear to respect to something far deeper. But before either of us could act on those feelings, a commotion from below shattered the moment. Shouts echoed across the pack grounds, followed by the urgent howl of the alert signal. Garrett tensed, head turning toward the sound. Something's wrong. We descended the stairs at a run, following the sounds of disturbance to the main courtyard. A group of warriors had formed a circle around something, or someone, their postures tense, ready for attack. Garrett pushed through the ring, and I followed close behind. In the center lay a wolf I didn't recognize, his body covered in wounds that oozed black ichor. His fur was matted with blood and a strange, shimmering substance that seemed to shift and move of its own accord. Despite his injuries, he was alive, his yellow eyes finding Garrett immediately. Alpha, he gasped, his voice barely audible. Stone Creek, fallen. Garrett knelt beside the wounded wolf. What happened, Ronan? Where is Magnus? Ambush, the wolf, Ronan, managed. They came through, breach in our territory. Dozens of them. Magnus fought, told me to run, to warn you. He coughed, black fluid speckling his lips. They're coming, all of them. Abaddon leads them. A chill ran down my spine. The Stone Creek pack was one of the strongest, their territory among the most defensible. If they had fallen— How long? Garrett demanded. Hours, maybe less. Ronan's eyes found mine, widening as he noticed the mark. The Luna marked. He spoke your name, said to tell you he remembers Celine, said you would understand. The name sent a jolt through me. Celine, the first Luna marked, the one who created the seal. How did Abaddon know I would recognize that name? Unless— Get him to Thalia, Garrett ordered the warriors. Now. As they carried Ronan away, Garrett turned to me, his expression grave. What did that mean? About Celine? I don't know, I admitted, but Magnus mentioned her, the first Luna marked. Victor showed her to me in my dream. I hesitated, piecing together fragments of knowledge that didn't quite align. Garrett, what if the Luna mark isn't just a blessing from the moon goddess? What if it's a connection, a lineage? His eyes widened slightly. You think you're somehow related to Celine after 500 years? Not related exactly, but connected. The same spirit, perhaps. Reborn when needed. The idea formed as I spoke it, feeling right in a way I couldn't explain. Maybe that's why Abaddon remembers. Maybe that's why he's so determined to break through now, with me. Garrett was silent for a long moment, considering. If true, it could explain much. The unusual strength of your abilities. The speed with which you've adapted to the mark. He shook his head. But it's just speculation. And right now we have more immediate concerns. He was right. If Stone Creek had fallen, the other packs would be next. And eventually Silver Ridge. Summon the council, Garrett ordered a nearby warrior. Inform the allied alphas. We prepare for war. The next hours passed in a blur of activity. Warriors were mobilized, defenses strengthened. The allied alphas gathered, grim-faced, as Garrett outlined what we knew and what we feared. Scouts were sent to assess the situation at Stone Creek and to monitor the other territories for signs of breach. Through it all, I felt a growing certainty that something was still missing. Some crucial piece of knowledge that would change everything. When the council dispersed to oversee preparations, I found Hammond in the archives, surrounded by ancient texts. He looked up as I entered, his ancient face lined with worry. The Stone Creek breach changes everything, Shem, he said without preamble. We no longer have the luxury of time. Have you found anything? I asked. Anything about alternatives to the sacrifice? He hesitated, then pulled a crumbling scroll from beneath a stack of parchments. This is fragmentary, damaged, but it mentions a ritual involving both the Alpha and the Luna marked, a joining of power rather than a sacrifice. My heart leaped. What kind of joining? That's where it becomes unclear. The text is damaged, words missing. He spread the scroll carefully on the table. See here, it speaks of the bond consummated in blood, but the next word is illegible. I studied the ancient writing, willing it to reveal its secrets. What about here, this symbol? Hammond squinted at where I pointed. That's the old symbol for union, for marriage, essentially. But in the ancient sense, a binding of souls, not just a social contract. Marriage. The word hung in the air between us. A binding of Alpha and Luna marked, not just through the mark's magic, but through the oldest ritual known to Wolfcoin. And this ritual, I said carefully, it could provide an alternative to the sacrifice? Possibly. The text suggests a different kind of seal, one powered by the living bond between Alpha and Luna marked, rather than by the essence of the marked one alone. Hammond looked troubled. But Alara, it's a fragment. There could be risks, consequences we can't foresee. Before I could respond, the door opened and Garrett entered, his expression tight with controlled tension. The scouts have returned, he said. Stone Creek has indeed fallen. The corruption spreads outward from their territory at an accelerated rate. And there's more. He hesitated, his silver eyes finding mine. Magnus lives, but he's changed. Changed how? I asked, dreading the answer. Like Victor, corrupted. The scouts saw him leading a group of forgotten ones toward Black Mountain territory. Garrett's jaw tightened. Abaddon turns our own against us. The implications were staggering. Magnus, one of the oldest and most powerful alphas, now under Abaddon's control. His knowledge of pack defenses, of weaknesses, would be invaluable to the enemy. The ritual, I said suddenly, the one Hammond found, a joining of Alpha and Luna-marked power. Could it work? Garrett's eyes moved to the scroll on the table, then back to me. What kind of joining? A binding of souls, Hammond explained. A marriage in the ancient sense, sealed in blood, and something else. The text is damaged. Garrett was silent for a long moment, his expression unreadable. Through our bond, I sensed a tumult of emotions, hope, fear, desire, and beneath it all, a fierce protectiveness. If it could spare Alara the sacrifice, he finally said, I would consider it. There's no guarantee, Hammond warned, and the full moon is tomorrow night. We would have little time to prepare to understand the potential consequences. What choice do we have? I asked. The corruption spreads. Abaddon grows stronger. The traditional sacrifice might not even work if what Victor told me is true, if it's what Abaddon wants, what feeds his power. Garrett's eyes met mine, silver in the lamplight. It would have to be your choice, Alara, freely given. A true union can't be forced or coerced. The weight of his words settled over me. A binding of souls, a marriage to Garrett. The idea sent a flutter through my chest that had nothing to do with fear and everything to do with the growing feelings between us. If it could work, I said softly, if it could save the packs without binding my essence to the seal for eternity, yes, I would choose it. The intensity of Garrett's gaze deepened. Through our bond, I felt his response, relief, gratitude, and something warmer that made my pulse quicken. Then we prepare, he said. Hammond, find out everything you can about this ritual, what we need, how it's performed. Alara and I will inform the Allied Alphas. He hesitated. Not everyone will approve. Some may see it as putting personal desires above pack safety. Let them, I said with more confidence than I felt. If we're right, this isn't about personal desire. It's about finding a better solution than repeating a cycle that may be exactly what Abaddon wants. As we left the archives, Garrett caught my hand, pulling me to a stop in the dim corridor. His silver eyes searched mine. Are you certain? He asked, his voice low and intense. This bond, it would be permanent, irrevocable. I thought of the connection that had grown between us since the mark appeared. The way I felt his presence, even when he wasn't near. The way our minds and hearts had begun to intertwine. It wasn't just the mark's magic. It was something more fundamental, as if my soul recognized his across the centuries that separated our experiences. I'm certain, I said simply. His hand tightened around mine, and through our bond, I felt the emotion he still couldn't quite express in words. But I knew, and he knew that I knew. Then we face what comes together, he said, as one. The word echoed in my mind as we walked toward the council chamber. 1. Not Luna marked an alpha, not sacrifice and survivor, but partners bound by choice as well as destiny. For the first time since the mark appeared on my skin, I felt more than hope. I felt certainty. The full moon hung heavy and luminous in the night sky, its silver light bathing the ancient stone circle where we gathered. 6 alphas stood at equidistant points around the perimeter, their power palpable in the cool air. Thalia moved between them, lighting ceremonial fires that burned with unusual blue-white flames. The scent of sacred herbs, moonflower, wolfsbane, elderberry, hung thick in the air. I stood in the center of the circle, the mark on my collarbone pulsing in time with my heartbeat. Tonight would determine everything. The ritual Hammond had discovered offered a slim hope, a chance to create a new kind of seal, one powered by a living bond rather than an eternal sacrifice. "Are you ready?" Garrett asked, stepping into the circle to join me. He wore only simple black pants, his chest bare in the moonlight. Ancient symbols had been painted on his skin in silver-white ash, mirroring those that Thalia had carefully applied to my own body. "As ready as I can be," I replied, unable to keep a slight tremor from my voice. Despite my determination, fear lingered. The ritual was pieced together from fragmentary text, its full consequences unknown. If we failed, the breaking would continue unchecked. If we succeeded, well, that too held unknowns. Garrett's eyes met mine, silver matching the moonlight above. "We still have a choice. We can stop this, try the traditional sacrifice instead." "No," I said firmly. "We don't know if the traditional sacrifice would even work anymore. Not if Abaddon has been using it to feed his power all along." I reached for his hand, feeling the warmth of his skin against mine. "This feels right. The bond between us, it's already strong. This ritual just completes what the moon goddess began." Through that bond, I sensed his emotions, determination, hope, and beneath it all, a fierce protective instinct that had grown with each passing day. Whatever happened tonight, whatever price we paid, we would face it together. Thalia approached, her ancient face solemn in the firelight. "It's time." She carried a silver bowl filled with a liquid that shimmered strangely, catching moonlight and holding it like captive stars. The moon reaches its apex in moments. The barriers between worlds grow thinnest. As if to emphasize her words, a distant howl split the night. Not the call of a natural wolf or pack member, but something wrong, distorted. A sound that scraped against the nerves like claws on stone. "They sense what we attempt," Talia said grimly. "The forgotten ones gather at the boundaries of our territory, led by those who once were ours." Magnus and Victor. The thought of 2 powerful wolves, corrupted and turned against their own kind, sent a chill down my spine. The past days had brought reports of other territories falling, other wolves changed. The breaking spread faster than anyone had anticipated, Abaddon's power growing with each new breach. "Begin the ritual," Garrett commanded, his voice carrying across the stone circle. The allied alphas, Caden, Freya, Antonio, and 2 others who had arrived just hours before, took up positions, their expressions a mixture of hope and skepticism. Not all had agreed with our plan, but faced with the rapidly deteriorating situation, none had offered a better alternative. Thalia raised the silver bowl. "Under the full moon, we call upon the ancient powers. We stand at the threshold between worlds, between life and death, between what was and what may be." Her voice took on a rhythmic quality, the words flowing like water over stone. "Alpha and Luna marked, separated by centuries but united by destiny. Tonight they choose to bind their souls, their power, their very essence, not in sacrifice, but in union." She handed the bowl to Garrett. "Drink first, Alpha of Silver Ridge. Take the essence of moon and earth into yourself." Garrett accepted the bowl, his eyes never leaving mine as he drank. The liquid seemed to glow as it passed his lips, a faint luminescence visible in his throat as he swallowed. He passed the bowl to me, and I drank in turn. The liquid was cool and tasted of moonlight and ancient forests, of wild things and secret knowledge. It spread through my body like quicksilver, setting every nerve alight. The mark on my collarbone flared in response, its golden glow intensifying until it illuminated the entire circle. I gasped as new awareness flooded through me. I could feel the barriers between worlds as tangible things, thin veils stretched to breaking. Could sense the forgotten ones pressing against those barriers. seeking entry, and at their head, a presence so ancient and terrible it made my soul quail. Abaddon, he knew what we attempted. He watched. Join hands, Talia instructed. Complete the circle. Garrett's hands found mine, warm and strong. The moment our skin touched, the bond between us exploded into new life. I could feel his heartbeat as if it were my own, could sense his thoughts and memories with perfect clarity. 2 centuries of life flowed into my consciousness. Battles fought, loves lost, the endless weight of responsibility. And beneath it all, the profound loneliness of an immortal bound to watch everyone around him age and die. In turn, I knew he experienced my shorter life, my quiet childhood as the record-keeper's daughter, my secret dreams of something more, the terror and wonder of discovering the mark. We stood fully revealed to each other, all barriers dropped, all secrets exposed. "The knife," Talia said, her voice seeming to come from a great distance. Hammond stepped forward, bearing an ancient blade of dark metal that seemed to absorb the moonlight rather than reflect it. Thalia took it, holding it between us. "Blood calls to blood," she intoned, "life to life, power to power." With practice of precision, she drew the blade across our joined palms. The pain was sharp but brief, quickly forgotten as our blood mingled. The mark responded instantly, its golden light spreading down my arm to encompass our joined hands. Where our blood mixed, it began to glow with the same unearthly light. "Repeat the words," Talia instructed. "Bind yourselves not just in blood, but in oath." Together we spoke the ancient vow, our voices perfectly synchronized, as if we'd rehearsed for years rather than hours. Blood to blood, heart to heart, soul to soul. Under the eyes of the moon goddess, we join as one. No power of earth or sky, no force of life or death, shall sever what is united this night. Two become one and one becomes two. The circle completes. As the final words left our lips, the mark's golden light expanded outward in a shockwave that swept through the stone circle. The alphas gasped as it passed through them, their eyes widening as they felt the power building in our joined hands. The fires around the circle roared upward, reaching for the moon above. The very air seemed to thicken, charged with magic older than civilization. And then abruptly everything stilled. The fires settled. The light of the mark returned to its normal glow. The night air cleared. For a moment I thought the ritual had failed, but then I felt it. The bond between Garrett and myself transformed. No longer a tentative connection, but an unbreakable tether binding our souls. I could feel his presence in my mind, warm and solid, as if he occupied a space that had always been reserved for him. Through that bond came emotions so intense they stole my breath. His wonder, his fierce joy, and beneath it all, a love so profound it defied description. A love that had waited 2 centuries to find its home. "Is it done?" Freya asked, breaking the silence. "Did it work?" Thalia studied us, her ancient eyes missing nothing. "The binding is complete, but the seal..." As if in answer to her unspoken question, I felt a sudden pull. The mark flared again, and my awareness expanded outward, beyond the stone circle, beyond the territory, to the very edges of the breaking. I could sense the weakened barriers, the points where the forgotten ones pressed most strongly against the thin membrane separating the worlds. Without conscious thought, I reached through the bond to Garrett, drawing on his strength, his centuries of power. Together, our combined essence flowed outward like golden light, seeking the tears in reality. Where that light touched the barriers, they strengthened, healing like flesh under a healer's hand. I gasped as the extent of our joined power became clear. This was more than either of us could have achieved alone, more even than the traditional sacrifice. This was creation rather than containment, healing rather than mere resistance. "The barriers," I whispered, my voice sounding strange to my own ears. "They're strengthening, but not everywhere, not at the points where the corruption has already taken hold." Garrett squeezed my hands, our blood still mingling between our palms. "What do you see?" "Abaddon." His name fell from my lips like a curse. "He's at Stone Creek territory. He's gathering power for something, a final push. If he succeeds, the barriers will shatter completely, beyond our ability to repair." Caden stepped forward, his massive frame tense with contained energy. "Then we fight, all of us, together. We take the battle to Stone Creek before he can complete whatever he plans." "Yes," Antonio agreed, his amber eyes gleaming in the moonlight. "The ritual has given us new strength, new hope. But words and magic alone won't defeat him. There must be battle. I looked at Garrett, feeling his mind working alongside my own, considering strategies, possibilities, risks. The bond between us made communication effortless, thoughts flowing between us without need for words. We'll need every wolf, he said finally, every pack. This is no longer about territory or ancient rivalries. If Abaddon succeeds, all worlds fall. The Alphas nodded, ancient enemies united by a common threat. They would return to their packs, gather their warriors, and meet us at the borders of Stone Creek territory by dawn. As they departed to make preparations, Garrett and I remained in the stone circle. Our hands had finally separated, the wounds already healing with unnatural speed, but the bond between us remained strong, pulsing with shared power. "Are you all right?" he asked, his voice gentler than the others had ever heard it. I nodded, though exhaustion pulled at me. The ritual had demanded more than physical strength. It had opened parts of my soul I hadn't known existed. "I feel different, like I'm more myself than I was before, but also more than myself." "Yes." His silver eyes studied me with wonder. "I feel it too. 2 centuries of life, and nothing prepared me for this." Through our bond, I sensed what he couldn't quite put into words, the profound shift in his understanding of himself, of power, of connection. For a wolf who had lived so long alone, carrying the weight of leadership in solitude, the experience of true union was transformative. "What happens now?" I asked. "We prepare for battle," he said simply, "and we pray our new bond is strong enough to face what comes." The night passed in a blur of preparation. Warriors were summoned, weapons distributed, battle plans formed. Throughout it all, Garrett and I remained connected, our thoughts and emotions flowing seamlessly between us. I found I could draw on his centuries of tactical knowledge, his experience in countless battles. He, in turn, seemed to access my intuitive understanding of the barriers, my connection to the mark's power. By dawn, the pack was ready. 400 wolves stood assembled in the main clearing, a mixture of Silver Ridge members and allies who had come to stand with us. Some were ancient, veterans of countless conflicts. Others were barely past their first shift, young wolves who had never known war. All understood the stakes. This day would determine not just their own survival, but the fate of all worlds. Garrett addressed them, his voice carrying across the clearing without effort. "Today we face an enemy unlike any other. The Forgotten Ones seek not just conquest, but corruption. They would unmake reality itself, bend it to their will, feed on our essence until nothing remains but chaos." The wolves listened in grim silence, understanding the gravity of his words. "But we do not fight alone," Garrett continued. "The other packs join us. The moon goddess watches, and the Luna Mark stands with us, her power bound to mine in ways not seen for 5 centuries. All eyes turned to me. I stood beside Garrett, the mark on my collarbone glowing faintly even in the morning light. Through our bond, I felt his pride, his faith in me, his determination that I would survive this day. "We move in formation," he instructed the assembled wolves. "Silver Ridge warriors at the center, allies on the flanks. We approach from the west, using the forest cover. The Forgotten Ones are strongest in open terrain where they can shift more freely. Among the trees, our wolf forms have the advantage." The pack dispersed to their assigned positions, moving with practiced efficiency. Garrett turned to me, his silver eyes searching my face. Through our bond, I felt his conflict. The alpha in him wanted me protected, kept far from the battle. But he knew I must be at the front, my power essential to whatever confrontation awaited. "Stay close to me," he said finally. "Our bond is strongest when we're together. If we become separated—" "We won't," I interrupted, reaching for his hand. "Whatever comes, we face it together. Isn't that what the ritual sealed?" His fingers tightened around mine. "Yes, together." The journey to Stone Creek territory took several hours, our forces moving through the dense forest with silent discipline. As we neared the border, the corruption became visible. Trees twisted into unnatural shapes, the ground beneath them seeping black ichor, the very air seeming to shimmer with wrongness. I felt the barriers here, not just weak, but deliberately torn. Whatever power Abaddon wielded, he had used it to rip holes in reality itself. Through our bond, I sensed Garrett's growing concern. This was worse than any of us had anticipated. We halted just within the tree line, overlooking what had once been the Stone Creek Pack's central gathering place. The sight that greeted us froze the blood in my veins. The clearing had been transformed. The ground was black and slick with corruption, pulsing like a living heart. Strange crystalline structures rose from the earth, glowing with sickly green light, and moving among them were the forgotten ones, dozens, perhaps hundreds, of shifting, changing creatures that seemed unable to settle on a single form. Some appeared almost wolf-like, others more human, and others bore no resemblance to any living thing I'd ever seen. At the center of it all stood three figures I recognize. Magnus, the corrupted alpha, his once proud form twisted, his skin mottled with patches of gray. Beside him, Victor, even more changed than when I'd last seen him, his body elongated, his black eyes reflecting nothing. And between them, a figure that could only be Abaddon. He appeared almost human at first glance, tall, powerfully built, with features that might once have been handsome. But there was a wrongness to him, a sense of something ancient and terrible wearing a shape that didn't quite fit. His eyes were the most disturbing, not black like Victor's, but a swirling vortex of colors that hurt to look at directly. Through our bond, I felt Garrett's shock and revulsion. In 2 centuries of life, he had never encountered anything like Abaddon. "He senses us," I whispered, feeling Abaddon's awareness shift toward the tree line. "He's known we were coming all along." As if in confirmation, Abaddon turned toward our position, those terrible eyes seeming to find me despite the distance and concealment. A smile spread across his too perfect face, revealing teeth that shifted shape even as I watched. "Luna Mark," he called, his voice carrying unnaturally across the distance. "I've been waiting for you. For so long." The words seemed to bypass my ears, resonating directly in my mind. Or should I say, Celine? Ariana. How many names have you worn across the centuries? Beside me, Garrett tensed. What is he talking about? "I don't know," I said, but even as the words left my mouth, something stirred in my memory. No, deeper than memory. Soul knowledge, recognition. "He knows me," I whispered. "Somehow he knows me." Abaddon spread his arms wide, as if welcoming long-lost friends. "Come, little Luna, you and your alpha. Complete the cycle once more. Feed me with your fear, your sacrifice, your eternal imprisonment. It's what you were made for, after all." The forgotten ones shifted restlessly around him, some taking forms that mimicked wolves, others becoming something stranger, more terrible. They were waiting for a signal, I realized, waiting for their king's command. "We need to disrupt whatever ritual he's preparing," Garrett said, his voice low. Through our bond, I felt him communicating with the other alphas, coordinating the attack. "The warriors will engage the forgotten ones. You and I must reach Abaddon himself." I nodded, my eyes fixed on the central figure. Something about Abaddon called to me, not in attraction, but in recognition, as if part of me had always known this confrontation was inevitable. The mark on my collarbone burned, responding to his presence. "Now," Garrett commanded, and the forest erupted with movement. 400 wolves burst from the tree line, shifting forms as they charged. The forgotten ones met them with inhuman shrieks, the two forces colliding in a chaos of fur and flesh and things that were neither. The battle had begun. Garrett and I moved together, our actions perfectly synchronized through our bond. We shifted to wolf form, using our superior speed to weave through the combat, heading directly for Abaddon. Behind us, I sensed the other alphas leading their forces, each targeting different sections of the enemy line. The corruption beneath our paws burned like acid, but we pressed on. Forgotten ones lunged at us from all sides, their forms shifting and changing even as they attacked. Some became monstrous parodies of wolves. Others took shapes that defied description. But none could match our combined power. Where my speed and agility failed, Garrett's centuries of battle experience took over. Where his strength met resistance, my connection to the mark provided unexpected power. We fought as one being, two bodies with a single purpose, drawing closer to the center of the clearing with each passing moment. Victor was the first to intercept us. His corrupted form moved with unnatural speed, cutting off our advance. In wolf form, he was even more terrible, his fur patchy, revealing grayish skin beneath, his black eyes reflecting nothing, his teeth too numerous, too sharp. "The alpha and his mate," he said, his voice distorted, wrong. "How touching, how predictable." Garrett snarled, hackles rising. Through our bond, I felt his fury at Victor's betrayal, his determination to end the creature that had once been his friend and advisor. "You were brothers once," I said, shifting back to human form to speak. For a century, you fought side by side. Does that mean nothing? Victor's monstrous head tilted, those black eyes studying me. Brothers? Perhaps, but always unequal. Always him in power, me in shadow. His form rippled, shifting partially toward human while retaining wolf aspects, a grotesque hybrid. Abaddon offers equality, freedom to become anything, everything. Look at yourself, Garrett said, also shifting to human form. This isn't freedom, it's corruption. Is it? Victor's mouth stretched in what might have been a smile. Or is it evolution? The next step. Your kind has stagnated, Garrett. Two forms, wolf and human, unchanging for millennia. We become whatever we wish. We adapt. We evolve. Through our bond, I sensed Garrett's momentary doubt. There was a twisted logic to Victor's words, a perspective that challenged everything wolves had believed about the Forgotten Ones. If that were true, I said, you wouldn't need to corrupt. You wouldn't spread suffering. True evolution lifts all, it doesn't destroy. Victor's non-expression shifted, something like anger flashing in those black depths. Spoken like one who has never known true hunger, true need. Your kind cast us out, drove us from a shared world into darkness, and now you judge how we survive. The battle raged around us, momentarily creating a small island of stillness in the chaos. In that pause, I felt something stir within me, that same soul knowledge that had responded to Abaddon. It wasn't always like this, I said, the words coming from someplace deeper than thought. You weren't always creatures of corruption. Something changed you. Or someone. Victor's form rippled, uncertainty making his shape less stable. What do you know of it, Luna marked. You who are reborn again and again, always to seal us away, always to maintain the Alpha's dominance? Reborn? Garrett's eyes narrowed. What does he mean? Before Victor could answer, a wave of power rolled across the clearing. Magnus had entered the fray, his corrupted alpha essence a tangible force that made the air itself seem to warp around him. He moved with terrible grace, each step leaving smoking footprints in the already corrupted earth. Enough talk, he growled, his voice barely recognizable as the dignified alpha I had met days earlier. Abaddon tires of waiting. Bring them. Victor hesitated, those black eyes flicking between us and Magnus. For a moment, I thought I glimpsed something like regret in his inhuman face. But then his form solidified, resolve hardening his corrupted features. As he commands, Victor said, and lunged. What followed was the most desperate fight of our lives. Victor and Magnus attacked in perfect coordination, their corrupted forms granting them powers no natural wolf possessed. They shifted aspects mid-attack, making it impossible to predict their movements. Where Victor was swift and precise, Magnus was overwhelming force. His alpha power corrupted, but not diminished. Garrett and I fought back to back, drawing on our bond for strength. When one of us faltered, the other compensated instantly. When Magnus's corrupted power struck like a physical blow, we shared the impact through our connection, having its effect. When Victor's shifting form became impossible to track with normal senses, I used the mark's awareness to anticipate his movements. But we were being driven backward, step by step, toward the center of the clearing, toward Abaddon, who watched with those swirling, impossible eyes, a smile playing about his lips. I realized with growing dread that this had been the plan all along, not to defeat us outright, but to herd us exactly where he wanted us. Garrett, I gasped between blows, they're leading us to him. Through our bond, I felt his grim acknowledgement. He'd realized it too. Then we use it. Let them think they've won. When we get close enough, he didn't need to finish the thought. I understood instantly. Our best chance, perhaps our only chance, was to get close enough to Abaddon to use our combined power directly against him. The binding ritual had given us strength, but we hadn't yet tested its full potential. We adjusted our strategy subtly, still fighting with everything we had, but no longer resisting the gradual movement toward the center. Victor noticed the change first, his black eyes narrowing in suspicion. But by then it was too late. We had nearly reached Abaddon. The Forgotten King stood within a circle of those strange crystalline structures, which pulsed with sickly light in time with some rhythm I couldn't quite perceive. Up close, his wrongness was even more apparent. His form seemed to contain too much, as if multiple beings occupied the same space. His eyes swirled with colors that shouldn't exist, that hurt to look at directly. At last, he said, and his voice bypassed my ears entirely, resonating inside my skull. The Alpha and the Luna marked. The eternal cycle continues. Garrett moved to stand slightly in front of me, protective even now. This ends today, Abaddon, one way or another. Abaddon's laughter was like broken glass in my mind. Ends? Oh, but you misunderstand. This never ends. That's the beauty of it. The cycle repeats again and again. The breaking comes. The Luna marked appears. The sacrifice is made. The seal is renewed. And I feed on the eternal suffering of one bound between worlds. Not this time, I said, stepping up beside Garrett. We've broken your cycle. The ritual we performed, it created a new kind of seal, one you can't feed on. For the first time, Abaddon's confident expression faltered. His swirling eyes fixed on me, then on Garrett, then on our joined hands. I felt his awareness probing at our bond, testing its nature. Clever, he admitted. A soul binding rather than a sacrifice. Drawing on living power rather than eternal imprisonment. His perfect mouth curved in a smile that held no warmth. But incomplete. The seal you created strengthens the existing barriers, but cannot close the breaches that already exist. Cannot undo the corruption that already spreads. He was right. I had felt it during the ritual. Our power could reinforce the weakened barriers, but not heal the tears that had already formed. Not reverse the corruption that had already taken hold. For that, Abaddon continued, you would still need a sacrifice, one or both of you surrendering your essence to mend what is broken. Through our bond, I felt Garrett's fierce rejection of the idea. After everything we'd discovered, after the union we'd forged, the thought of either of us sacrificing ourselves was unacceptable. But what alternative remained? As if sensing my thoughts, Abaddon smiled. There is another way, of course. Surrender, accept the breaking. Allow the worlds to merge once more as they were meant to be. Your kind and mine, sharing reality again. Sharing? Garrett's voice was sharp with disbelief. The corruption you spread destroys everything it touches. That's not sharing, it's conquest. The corruption is merely adjustment, Abaddon said, spreading his hands in a gesture almost human. Your reality resists us, rejects us. It must be convinced to accept our return. I stared at him, trying to understand the being before me. Not just a monster, but something more complex. A creature that believed, in some twisted way, that it was reclaiming what was rightfully its own. You were cast out, I said slowly, pieces falling into place. Millennia ago, your kind and ours shared this world, but something happened. The alphas of that time used their combined power to exile your people to another realm. Exile? Abaddon's perfect features contorted with sudden rage. Is that what your histories call it? We were slaughtered, hunted to near extinction. Those few who survived were driven to the very edges of existence, forced into a realm that was never meant to sustain life. His voice vibrated with ancient fury. We adapted. We evolved. We became what we needed to be to survive. And now we returned to claim what was always ours. The truth of his words resonated within me, connecting to that strange soul knowledge that had been growing stronger since the ritual. I felt Garrett's shock through our bond, his worldview shifting as he absorbed this new perspective on a history he had believed settled for centuries. Even if that's true, Garrett said finally, the corruption you spread now would destroy everything, including those you claim to fight for. A necessary phase, Abaddon replied, his rage subsiding as quickly as it had appeared. The joining of realms is traumatic, but once completed, a new balance will form, a new world where all forms are possible, all evolutions accepted. His swirling eyes fixed on me. You understand, don't you, Luna marked? Part of you remembers the world before the sundering. Part of you knows the injustice of what was done. And I did remember. Or something in me did. Some fragment of Selene, perhaps, or Ariana, or all the Luna marked who had come before. I remembered a world where many forms existed in balance, where shifting wasn't limited to wolf and human, where diversity of being was celebrated rather than feared. But I also sensed the lie in Abaddon's words. The necessary phase he spoke of would consume all life as it currently existed. The new world he envisioned would be built on the ashes of the old, with his kind dominant and all others subservient, if they survived at all. You don't want balance, I said, the mark on my collarbone flaring in response to my certainty. You want revenge. You want dominance. You've had millennia to nurture your hatred, and now you would use it to destroy everything. Abaddon's perfect face hardened. I offered you understanding. I offered you truth. But like all your kind, you choose blindness. He gestured to Victor and Magnus, who had been standing motionless throughout our exchange. Take them. The ritual must be completed before the moon rises again. Victor and Magnus moved with inhuman speed, but Garrett and I were ready. Drawing on our bond, we channeled combined power through the mark, creating a shockwave of golden light that sent our attackers staggering backward. In that moment of distraction, we shifted to wolf form and lunged at Abaddon himself. He was faster than he appeared, sidestepping our initial attack with fluid grace. His form rippled, arms elongating, fingers becoming talons that slashed at us with frightening precision. We dodged, circling, looking for an opening. Through our bond, Garrett and I formulated a strategy without words. He would engage directly, using his superior strength and fighting experience to keep Abaddon occupied. I would channel our combined power through the mark, targeting the crystalline structures that surrounded us. They were part of whatever ritual Abaddon had been preparing, their destruction potentially critical. We moved as one, Garrett charging directly at Abaddon while I darted between the crystal formations. The Forgotten King seemed momentarily confused by our split attack, his attention divided. Garrett pressed the advantage, driving Abaddon backward with ferocious intensity. I reached the nearest crystal, feeling its wrongness up close. It pulsed with corrupted power, drawing energy from the torn barriers between worlds. Instinctively, I shifted to human form and placed my palm against its surface, channeling the mark's power directly into its structure. The effect was immediate and catastrophic. The crystal shattered with explosive force, sending shards in all directions. A scream tore through the air. Not mine, not Garrett's, but Abaddon's. His perfect form convulsed as if the crystal's destruction had wounded him directly. The crystals, I called to Garrett. They're connected to him. Destroy them. Understanding flowed through our bond. Garrett disengaged from Abaddon, shifting his attack to the remaining crystals, while I continued my own assault. One by one, we shattered the formations, each destruction sending visible waves of pain through Abaddon's form. The Forgotten King's rage was terrible to behold. His shape began to shift rapidly, cycling through dozens of forms in seconds. Wolf, human, things with too many limbs, things with wings, things I had no words to describe. Power radiated from him in waves that made reality itself seem to bend. Enough! The word exploded in my mind with such force that I staggered. Abaddon stood at the center of the now ruined circle, his form settling on something that combined aspects of wolf and human, but was neither. You understand nothing of what you interfere with. The breaking comes with or without my ritual. The barriers fail, the worlds merge. It is inevitable. Nothing is inevitable, Garrett growled, shifting to human form as he moved to stand beside me. Not while we stand together. Through our bond, I felt his absolute conviction, his faith in us, in our union, in the power we had discovered together. And beneath it all, the emotion he had finally embraced fully, love, profound and unshakable, for the wolf who had become his other half. Drawing on that connection, I reached for the mark's power. Golden light spread from the crescent on my collarbone, flowing down my arm to where my hand clasped Garrett's. Our combined essence gathered between us, visible as a sphere of pure radiance that grew with each heartbeat. Abaddon watched, those swirling eyes narrowing. The binding ritual, impressive but insufficient. His own power gathered around him, a darkness that seemed to absorb light. You cannot heal what is already broken, cannot close what is already torn. At best, you delay the inevitable. We'll take those odds, Garrett said, his voice steady despite the enormous energy we channeled. With a shared thought, we released our gathered power. The sphere of golden light shot toward Abaddon, moving faster than thought. He raised hands that were no longer quite hands, creating a barrier of darkness to meet our attack. The two forces collided with world-shaking impact. Light and darkness warred, neither gaining advantage. Through our bond, I felt Garrett pouring everything he had into the attack. 2 centuries of alpha power, his entire life force. I matched him, channeling all my strength through the mark, drawing on the lineage of Luna-marked wolves that had come before me. For a moment, perfect balance existed. Then slowly our golden light began to push back the darkness. Inch by inch, we gained ground. Abaddon's perfect features contorted with effort. "Even if you defeat me," he gasped, "the breaking continues. The barriers fail. You've won nothing." "We've won time," I countered, voice strained with effort. "Time to find a better answer than eternal conflict." With a final surge of combined will, we pushed our power forward. The golden light engulfed Abaddon, surrounding him in a cocoon of radiance that contracted rapidly. His scream transcended sound, becoming a psychic wave of rage and frustration that battered at our minds. Then silence. Where Abaddon had stood, only a small crystal remained, similar to those we had destroyed, but golden rather than green, pulsing with clean light rather than corruption. "What happened?" Garrett asked, staring at the crystal. "Is he contained?" I said, the knowledge coming from that same deep place that had guided me throughout the confrontation. "Not destroyed, perhaps that's not possible, but imprisoned as he once imprisoned others." Around us, the battle had shifted. With Abaddon's fall, the Forgotten Ones seemed disoriented, their coordination failing. The corrupted wolves, Victor, Magnus, the others who had been turned, appeared suddenly confused, as if waking from a dream. Some fled into the surrounding forest. Others collapsed where they stood, their twisted forms gradually reverting to something closer to natural wolves. The mark on my collarbone pulsed, drawing my attention to the ruined ground beneath our feet. The corruption remained, spreading outward from the clearing like black veins through healthy flesh. The barriers between worlds, though no longer actively torn by Abaddon's power, remained damaged, weakened. "It's not over," I said quietly. He was right about that much. The breaking continues, just more slowly. The corruption spreads, the barriers weaken. Garrett's hand tightened around mine. "Then we continue as well. The binding ritual gave us power we've barely begun to understand. If we can't heal the damage all at once, we do it gradually, area by area, breach by breach." The allied alphas approached, their forces regrouping around them. All showed signs of hard fighting, wounds, exhaustion, grim determination. But all had survived, and with them, most of their warriors. "Abaddon?" Caden asked, his massive frame tense with residual battle readiness. Garrett indicated the golden crystal. "Contained for now, but the breaking continues, the corruption spreads. Our work is just beginning." Freya's cold blue eyes studied me, noting the still glowing mark. "The binding ritual worked then. You found another way." "A beginning," I said, "not an ending. The cycle Abaddon relied on is broken, but the damage remains." "Then we adapt," Antonio said simply. "We learn, we heal what can be healed, we contain what cannot." The other alphas nodded, ancient enemies united by shared struggle. In their eyes, I saw something new. Not just respect for the Luna marked, but understanding of the bond Garrett and I had forged, recognition of the power it represented. "The packs will stand together," Freya declared, "as they did in the first breaking. But this time not to exile or destroy, to heal, to balance." Through our bond, I felt Garrett's pride in that moment, pride in his fellow alphas, in the packs they led, in their capacity to grow beyond ancient prejudices and fears. After centuries of isolation and competition, the wolf pack stood united. "We should begin with Stone Creek territory," he suggested. "Cleanse the corruption from Magnus's lands first, then work outward." Caden nodded. "My pack will join yours in the cleansing. The others should return to their territories, assess the damage, contain the spread of corruption as best they can until we can extend our efforts." The plan was quickly agreed upon. The alphas would return to their territories with their forces, establishing containment zones around corrupted areas. Garrett and I, with Caden's pack as support, would remain at Stone Creek to begin the healing process, developing techniques that could later be applied elsewhere. As the Allied forces began to disperse, I found myself drawn to the golden crystal that contained Abaddon. It pulsed with a rhythm that matched my heartbeat, connected to me in ways I didn't fully understand. "What will we do with him?" I asked Garrett softly. His silver eyes studied the crystal thoughtfully. "Not what was done before, not exile, not eternal imprisonment as part of a seal. Through our bond, I felt his certainty. We find a better way, one that acknowledges the injustice done to his kind, but doesn't allow vengeance to consume more lives." I nodded, feeling the rightness of his words. The cycle of exile and return, of breaking and sealing, had perpetuated suffering for millennia. It was time for something new. "The Forgotten Ones who weren't corrupted beyond saving," I said. thinking of those we had seen fleeing or reverting after Abaddon's fall. Perhaps they could be helped, healed, eventually reintegrated. Garrett's expression was solemn. It won't be easy. Centuries of fear and prejudice don't vanish overnight. But yes, we begin a new chapter. Not just for us, but for all. His hand found mine, our fingers intertwining as naturally as breathing. Through our bond flowed shared purpose, shared hope, shared love. The mark on my collarbone glowed softly, no longer a burden or a destiny of sacrifice, but a connection to something greater than either of us alone. The sun had begun to set, casting long shadows across the corrupted clearing. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, the beginning of the healing process, the development of techniques to cleanse the corruption, the long work of rebuilding what had been damaged or destroyed. But tonight, for a few hours at least, there would be rest, celebration of victory, mourning for those lost, preparation for the work ahead. And for Garrett and me, time to explore the bond we had forged, the union that had changed everything. Come, he said softly. The others will establish camp at the edge of the territory. We've done enough for today. As we walked away from the battlefield, I felt the weight of the mark differently than before. No longer a burden of destined sacrifice, but a responsibility freely chosen. No longer separation, but connection. The Luna mark had appeared to save the world from breaking, but in the process, it had healed something just as profound. The alpha who had waited 2 centuries to find his other half, and the wolf who had never known her true potential until the moment flames revealed her destiny. My name is Alara, and this is the story of how I died to become who I was always meant to be. But it's also the story of how I lived, how I loved, how I found a way to break a cycle of suffering millennia old. The breaking continues, but so do we, together, as one. And that makes all the difference.